Good afternoon and welcome back to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm your host, Jill Malandrino, global markets reporter at Nasdaq. We've been coming to you live from the market site with a special day of veterans coverage. Helping me with this segment, we have Andre Corpuz, who's the managing director of VETS Indexes, Karl Snyder, managing director and chief market strategist of VETS Indexes. We're also joined by Laval Simons and Matthew Wang. Thank you very much for joining us, gentlemen, at Market Site today. Let's tell us about VETS, the VETS Index.
About 3 years ago when we entered in, we were looking at the ESG space. We found that a lot of the data out there was, for the feel-good ESG was inconsistent, wasn't really based on a lot of facts. So we went out there and started researching, and what we found was a unique signal in the veteran space. So we teamed up with the Military Times using their data, which we found to be some of the most complete data in terms of the survey that they conduct, the Military Times Best for Vets survey. And we use that data to comprise an index.
And Karl, would you say that this falls into the ESG category?
Oh, absolutely. And I can elaborate a little bit more on that for falling into ESG. Where we feel that it falls into VETS indexes is within G, the governance aspect of governance. We believe, and we've done research to believe that companies and that higher diversity inclusive look into that segment and want to bring those type of people on board and have that type of human capital within their organization. There have been studies, the research is out there, that ultimately these companies do better from a financial standpoint and a performance standpoint in their different metrics. So where the governance actually comes in is with corporate leadership. They then take the initiative to go ahead and to hire these individuals, implement plans to incorporate them within their organization, and they in turn are able to do well for these people, but ultimately they're shareholders. And the one caveat I like to add, though, what we've also found within that governance spot with VETS and different types of inclusivity programs is predominantly large cap. And the reason for that is that companies have to have the financial wherewithal. So it's not necessarily small, mid-cap companies aren't doing this. A lot of companies are doing great things for veterans, but predominantly large cap companies have the financial resources to implement the programs, to have veteran outreach, veteran initiatives, to make sure they have the staffing to do so, and to keep these programs running for long periods of time. We want to see these programs go over long periods of time.
How is the index constructed, and what are the companies evaluated for?
Okay, well, like Andre had mentioned, we partnered with Military Times, so we don't do a lot of factoring for the index. What we do is we take the list from the Military Times, the extensive list, and it's done independently, which we like. We then take a look at, the first metric is companies have to be publicly traded. So there are going to be some companies on the list, Military Times, that are private. Unfortunately, they can't be in the index. The next thing is we just want to make sure it's investable from a liquidity standpoint. We want to make sure it has a market capitalization of at least 200 million. So it's not a high hurdle. But again, going back to the large cap seems to really be the place. The next thing is from a liquidity trading standpoint, the companies have to trade at least $1 million on a daily basis. And the other thing is just to make sure companies are truly committed, they have to have been included in the survey for 3 years running in order to make the index. We want to make sure that, again, the commitment is really there for our veterans and ultimately giving credibility to the index.
All right, and Andre, what about VETS Indexes? How did you get involved with the program?
Well, as I mentioned, we sort of looked into the space at ESG, and we thought that this is really the unique signal that we wanted to get involved, to look at, to get involved in. And what we basically did was, as Karl mentioned, was we partnered up with Military Times, right, because there's a lot of data out there that includes veterans, and we just really found that the Military Times survey is the one that was the most complete and out there. Okay,
so Laval and Matt, I'm going to kick it off over to you. What skills did you bring home with your time into the service, and how do you incorporate that with what you're doing out in the corporate world?
From what I learned in the military, you learn reliability, teamwork, how to deal with adversity under stress, both in combat and in peacetime. So those kind of skill sets can translate into the civilian world as well. It's just getting our guys to learn how to translate that, and you can be successful in this world.
All right, and Matt, is there a specific incident that you could take from your time in the military that relates to what you do specifically in the corporate world today?
Yeah, so I was an intelligence officer, and some of the things that I learned in doing that role is that, takes a lot to kind of analyze information on a relatively quick basis. So I felt like, now that I'm in the corporate world, I'm able to deal with high stress situations in a relatively calm manner. And I feel like that's something that, I learned in the military. It's helped me out.
And Laval, what are some challenges that you face transitioning from the military life to the civilian life?
The biggest the challenge you'll have is translating your military speak into civilian speak. So when I had got my 6 and 66 back 10 years ago, that was a little bit of a challenge back then, trying to get companies to understand what I can do and what I've learned in the military, how I can manage people and all those different skill sets from my point of view.
All right, and Matt, we'll wrap it up with you. What's your best advice that you can give to transitioning from military life, getting into the corporate world?
Yeah, I'd say, start early. It's never too early to start preparing for when you get out. Everyone eventually transitions out, whether, you stay in for a year or if you retire after 30 years. So just starting to network early with the people that you're serving with.
All right, well, thank you very much for joining us today. And of course, thank you for your service. And thank you for joining me throughout the day. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.